welcome to today's edition of PWCI This Week. The wrestling world has been rocked and turmoil rages throughout the country on this Independence Day week. So much to report on, we'll just call this episode Justice with Crimey. If there were ever a time where I really don't want to do one of these news episodes, it's now. But with the events going on in the country combined with it being Independence Day week, keeping silent about it is not an option. Expressing my opinion is absolutely necessary, because how much longer am I going to have the right to express my opinion? This country is practically engulfed in a civil war. This graphic perfectly illustrates what is going on. The Marxist uprising determined to dismantle and destroy this country. Socialism, communism, and fascism all derive from the very same ideology, Marxism, and it absolutely must be stood up to and defeated. We got a lot to get to throughout this program. Stories are going to be tied to just 3 themes. While this is supposed to be a pro wrestling program, politics fully engulf the wrestling world with what is going on, so let's get started. The We begin where we left off last week with the new version of Me Too, the Speaking Out movement, and a loose Mo-Elgin update. I wish to remind you the 6th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution states, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Also, suspects are presumed innocent until convicted in a court of law. The court of public opinion and social media are not substitutes for an actual courtroom in front of a judge and jury. If crimes were committed, charges should be filed and prosecuted. Also, LuFisto and Barbie Hayden have put out tweets saying anyone coming forward to do so with the right reasons in mind, and not to use the movement to settle personal vendettas or seeking revenge for someone they don't like. Cheating, jealousy, and name-calling is in no way the same category as sexual assault. Those who agree to sexual activity but want revenge on the person is abusing the Speaking Out movement. Dozens of wrestlers have been fired and suspended. Companies shut down in the wake of a list put out by PW Project Truth, and individual stories have been posted to Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook accusing multiple parties. It's so bad, pro wrestling in one country may be finished for years. That would be the United Kingdom. We'll start with WWE again. On the fired list, Travis Banks and El Laredo for inappropriate sexual conduct. Jack Gallagher was fired for sexual misconduct when someone described an incident from 2014. It is expected these folks will be cut next. Velveteen Dream accused of being a child predator. Austin Theory for inappropriate communications with a teenager. Jordan Devlin, the former Cruiserweight champion, for sexual abuse, which he denies. There's been a claim that an NXT contract offer was withdrawn from a wrestler when sexual misconduct allegations were made against him. The person who reported that story couldn't name the individual because it was off the record. Several Twitter users believe it is Josh Briggs, who was the current Evolve champion before it went on hiatus and may never run another event due to COVID-19. The roster cuts may accelerate as WWE is looking to get rid of problematic wrestlers. NXT UK may end up being disbanded with so many people being accused of various crimes. There is concern that pro wrestling in Britain, which was already having major issues due to WWE blocking NXT UK from talent from working the local independents, and the local independents having to fire so many of the people they had left, the whole industry in the country already reeling from COVID-19 may be forced to start over from scratch or fade away into obscurity. There are several longtime WWE personalities on the list who were included but are not going anywhere, such as Randy Orton, Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Pat Patterson, and Vince McMahon himself. On the Impact Wrestling side, Joey Ryan, Dave Crist, Mo-Elgin, and Tessa Blanchard have been let go. Tessa Blanchard was stripped of the world title and fired after she had refused to leave Mexico for an upcoming wedding and fear she couldn't get back due to the pandemic. She was previously flagged for bullying and racism. WWE reportedly has contacted her anyway, with Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair on sabbatical. Michael Elgin was previously suspended, but after a backstage fight with Sami Callihan, he was fired. In a public statement, Elgin did not acknowledge the accusations against him, but said, "I appreciate the time and opportunities given to me with Impact. That locker room, the film crew, and all the company officials were a pleasure to be associated with. I hope that in time things get sorted. For now, I have to look at the bright side. I have more time to spend with my son and reclaim time that has been missed." He was accused by a Canadian wrestler of sending inappropriate photographs of his private parts. Adam Lash, remember him? He famously trashed Michael Elgin, pushing himself as a grand champion of women, and was fired from Paramount TV for trying to block a IWA Mid-South event featuring Elgin and acting unprofessionally. Well, Lash himself was accused of sexual harassment, bullying, and sending unsolicited pictures of his private parts. He confessed his guilt, saying it was a joke that got out of control, where those pics were sent to friends, in which one got sent to the wrong person, and it snowballed. How ironic. And yes, Molly Chapman couldn't keep quiet. While not acknowledging her spot on a list with numerous charges and still habitually, pathologically lying about it, she's taking a victory lap over Elgin getting the boot. Keep in mind, Molly refused to show up for court for months and months after her disastrous ex parte hearing and should have been charged with perjury for false testimony on court filings. Because of her own rampant dishonesty, the people who reached out to Molly to share their stories, who in turn took up the sword on their behalf to call out suspected abusers, one of those being Joey Ryan, were dismissed. The point was suggested to me that Molly was so crazy she screwed it up for everyone, which may have made other victims' situations worse. Let me remind you of what Molly was tagged with: sexual harassment, grooming, gaslighting, emotional terrorism, witness intimidations, blackmail by storing and distributing others' intimate photos without permission, and weaponizing screenshots. Also, the person she first accused of misconduct, Sean Orleans, was thankfully taken off the list, as he was accused of far more than he actually did. But now Molly's after someone else. She moved from Twitter to Facebook and detailed a list of charges toward an Alton tattoo artist, Kyle Holker, of whom she apparently dated for a time, 2017 or prior. Before you say, "Here we go again," there were multiple people who have stepped forward with tales of abuse with the individual, but as far as we can tell, he is not involved in the wrestling business, though he may have wrestlers as clients. Some promotions ended up shutting down as a result of speaking out revelations. The biggest one of the bunch was Chikara, promoted by Mike Quackenbush. Several accusations were made against him, systematic abuse towards female staffers and trainees. As a result, several wrestlers cut ties with the promotion. Another was booted for domestic violence. Quackenbush, in a nearly 15-minute video statement, went through all the allegations against him, accepting full responsibility for some of them, apologizing for those, but also denied others. He has stepped down as head trainer of the Wrestle Factory. It does not appear the organization, which has been around for 18 years, will be put up for sale. Jordan Grace, with help from a friend, has put out the story that she was sexually assaulted by former WWE developmental wrestler and promoter Byron Wilcott. She is held back on reporting it due to the way she had behaved when she was younger and feared it would be used against her to discredit it. Savannah Stone also called out Wilcott as well for humiliation and coercion, where he threatened to withhold booking fees if she didn't hold hands or kiss a particular person on the roster. Wilcott also displayed contempt for women's wrestling and only booked her to be a valet. As a result, numerous promotions cut ties with him. I sincerely hope criminal charges are filed against him because this cannot stand. On the flip side, Grace started a crowdfunding campaign to help an Air Force veteran who has suffered due to COVID-19 and lost everything as a result in exchange for an autographed picture. After 24 hours, more than enough cash was raised that she could have imagined to help the man known only as James and close donations. Still, so much out there, I cannot get through it all. All Elite Wrestling has its own list of the accused, and I have avoided talking about some local names on the list due to how complicated their cases are. This story will continue several more weeks and most likely will revisit it again. Right now we're going to take a short time out, as for the first time in a long time we'll look at the schedule of upcoming wrestling events not happening in Central Illinois but in neighboring states. You are watching Justice with Crimey on PWCI this week.
As drivers, we make a million little choices each and every time we get behind the wheel. Choices like distracted driving, DUI, speeding, and no seatbelt are proven killers. But there's another threat lurking on your roadways that you need to consider. It's the choice by drivers to ignore the move-over law. This lethal choice has led to the death of first responders from all over the state. Men and women sworn to serve and protect you, the people of Illinois.
Slow down, move over. It's the law.
So now, once again, I must make comments on the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. While the governor brags Illinois is the only state in the country that fully followed the CDC recommendations to the letter and gloats at states like Arizona, Texas, and Florida who reopened too quick and their cases are spiking so much they had to relock, let me throw cold water on it all. Last week, the director of the CDC, Robert Redfield, told reporters he believes the true count of COVID-19 cases are likely up to 10 times higher than the official numbers. On Saturday, the official number was roughly 2.5 million with 125,000 deaths. The news media would have you believe 5% of all COVID-19 infected will die. It's a death sentence and we must keep the country locked down. Well, if it's 10 times higher, 25 million, the death rate is 0.5%, in line with what I had stated on this program a few weeks ago. Also, while certain areas are claiming we're out of ICU beds, the hospitals are getting overwhelmed. They didn't have a large number of beds to begin with. Alabama has less than 300 in the entire state. The number of serious and critical cases are under 16,000 nationwide for the first time in ages. And note, there's still over 1 million unemployed healthcare workers available. The majority of the new reported cases are of the low-risk category, 18 to 34, thus are mild. Also, elected leaders who are freaking out over the rising cases, but did encourage the protesting, you have no room to complain. But they're going to take cover behind the news media who are claiming the protests didn't cause the spike because they were outside. It was caused by people staying home. Well, gee, so the Karens and the Daryls want everyone to stay home because of COVID, yet that is the very thing getting them sick. All these months, stay home, stay home, stay home. Actually made it worse. Nice job, Karen. Nice job, Daryl. You unwittingly, through your own paranoia, trashing those who criticize these stupid narratives, screwed yourselves over. With all the court cases flying back and forth, the main one being watched is Pritzker versus Bailey, which we still don't have a decision whether the federal court wants to take over the case, as Pritzker wants, or send it back to Clay County, where the Gov faces certain defeat. I fear they are trying to find some way legally to justify holding on to it when the suit only covers violations of state law. The Gov is also saying all kids will be required to wear masks when they return to school in the fall. What will actually happen is the kids will wear the same mask multiple days in a row, growing bacteria and other things in the mask. They aren't meant to be worn that much. It's more likely they'll become sick from illnesses due to excessive mask wearing, and the quack epidemiologists won't care. I mentioned Florida was one of the states relocking down. WWE is now seeing a rash of COVID-19 infections among its roster. So far, Renee Young, Caleb Braxton, Adam Pierce, Jamie Noble have come out saying they have contracted it. 24 others may have it as well, but the company is forbidding its superstars from revealing their positive test results. WWE is forbidden under HIPAA laws from revealing them either. Kevin Dunn, who Jim Cornette calls a beaver, forbid talent from wearing masks and made a big scene over the PA system about it. John Moxley had to pull out of AEW events since he is Renee's husband in close contact. Supposedly, plans are in the works to hold live events in front of fans again, as some states have lifted restrictions. Vince McMahon is determined to be the first one to hold such an indoor sports show using a venue in Lakeland, Florida late this month or next that can hold 8,000 fans, even though smaller indie fans have already done so. Little follow-up to IWA Mid-South getting heavy criticism for while other promotions did the same thing and not a peep about it. The wrestling media posted photos of a game-changer wrestling event in the same city that was outside in an amphitheater, and fans were spaced out on straw bundles, comparing it to that. Truth be told, many people despise Ian Rotten for a long list of things, many of which he is guilty of, and the press won't pass up any chance to pile on. And yes, he's on the PW Truth Project list. Wondering when Dark Side of the Ring TV, the TV series, will do an episode on him, because they could do multiple episodes on him alone. Incidentally, that IWA Mid-South event featured two men who had been fired from Impact Wrestling, Mo-Elgin and Jake Christ. The protests and the riots the last couple of weeks have been influencing the wrestling world. One of the items I haven't covered was the retirement of a persona in response to it. Protesters have made a mission to delete everything that offends them, whether or not they can actually explain why it offends them. Much of the time they can, because the schools are doing a lousy job of teaching history. How else would some of these hyper-emotional mental wrecks actually believe Abraham Lincoln was a white supremacist instead of the man instrumental in ending slavery in the United States and want his statues torn down? Anyway, the symbol that triggers people more than anything else is the Confederate battle flag. Several wrestlers have employed the symbol in their personas. Recent examples include the Beck family and Tracy Smothers' clan. One of those characters was the Dixieland Destroyer, who was managed by Georgia Bulldog, who wore the uniform of a Confederate soldier. The man behind the mask, Stumpy, announced he is retiring the character out of concern of the current situations with the world. Because of the gimmick, he went a lot farther in his wrestling career than he otherwise would have. His career really took off when he debuted for IWA Mid-South, taking on the big names of the deathmatch wrestling scene and performing at the Gathering of the Juggalos before heading to Dreamwave Wrestling as a Beck family member and winning titles. In recent years, he began to feel some way about it and changed his mask to a red and blue one with a D in the middle, but now feels it's no longer appropriate to do the persona anymore. He is still active as a wrestler, using his original Stumpy nickname. A word about the woke Taliban and all the political hacks running around, tearing down statues, renaming buildings, changing products, censoring movies in a panic. It's so ridiculous, it's a parody of itself. The entertainment industry is trying to cleanse itself of anyone who's played a character in blackface. Products such as Aunt Jemima maple syrup are being rebranded because Nancy Green is now seen as a racial stereotype, even though her grand and great-grandchildren strongly disagrees, especially since her story is a great American success story that should be touted during Black History Month, where she arose from slavery, becoming a wealthy woman. Locations are being renamed because any name that came from the Confederacy is deemed too racially insensitive to remain. Yeah, we have the Dixie Chicks dropping the name Dixie and Lay Antebellum dropping the name Antebellum because somebody's triggered by them. And of course we have the attack on Civil War history and former presidents. A cosmetics company is removing references to whitening because they think someone is offended by the word. HUD Secretary Dr. Ben Carson stated, "We need to grow up as a society and stop being offended by everything." But the folks who are tearing down the statues can't seem to explain why they're offensive or even who they are. Why else would these morons attack Abe Lincoln, who ended slavery, or take down a statue of someone who is an abolitionist? Some of these folks who say, let the schools teach history instead of having them in the public square. Yeah, that might seem to be a good idea, except they aren't doing a very good job of teaching history to begin with. However, don't believe these guys vandalizing and rioting will escape justice. These thugs aren't covering their tracks very well. Besides their faces being on camera, the FBI is looking at their social media posts to track them down, and they're being arrested by the hundreds. 500 of them so far. The man who instigated a riot attacking Marketplace Mall in Champaign, Shamar Betts, fled to Mississippi and was captured by U.S. Marshals on a burglary warrant. The losers tearing down statues, if they're ID'd and arrested, they face up to 10 years in prison under the Veterans Memorial Preservation Act. And yes, they've also captured the men who killed that former police chief in St. Louis, David Dorn. Who are these guys attacking American history? While they claim to be associated with Black Lives Matter, Pew Research Council says only 17% of the protesters are actually African American. 46%, nearly half, are white Caucasians. 22% Latino. The graphic I showed at the beginning, they are most definitely wanting the country dismantled and replaced with Marxist totalitarian socialism with them in charge of it. The People's Republic of Socialist States, so to speak. And make no mistake, Patrice Cullors, the co-founder, is proud to say she's a trained Marxist in a video from 2015, having learned from former members of the Weather Underground terrorist organization. One of its underwriters, Susan Rosenberg of the Thousand Currents organization, is herself a convicted terrorist with Weather Underground. Rainer Shea, a writer for Op-Ed News and a proud radical American communist, wrote a lengthy piece encouraging using Marxism-Leninism to turn the revolt into a full-blown revolution. I would suggest saying African American Lives Matter instead of BLM to make a distinction, as not all African Americans support what BLM stands for. And BLM has made it clear it does not support all African Americans. How else would a professor at Cleveland State University say, no matter what your race or ethnicity, when you go through the academy, that identity becomes second to policing. You become blue. A white female BLM member in a viral video was seen yelling at 2 black police officers, telling them they were part of the problem. What a bigot. And Senator Dick Durbin had to apologize to African American Senator Tim Scott for calling his police reform bill token. And yet another offensive gaffe by someone who manages to keep getting reelected every time and shouldn't. In the absence of law and order, violent crime skyrockets. Chicago once again saw a dozen shot, over a dozen killed over the weekend. Several other cities have seen gun-violent crimes skyrocket. Again I ask, what has Black Lives Matter done to discourage, slow, or stop any of it? And for those who want the police done away with, right here in Springfield, Bunomatic saw a workplace shooting just last Friday. 3 people were killed by the gunman before he turned the gun on himself. You think a social worker would have been the right person to send in to deal with it? We need law enforcement. Otherwise, there's chaos and numerous people are endangered. Simple matter is this. If the radical left wing takes power in November, and by the way, Joe Biden will merely be a figurehead as he can't even hold it together for more than 5 minutes without gaffing. This isn't going to stop. We must defend our country from these anarchists who want this country overthrown and completely replaced. And civil rights will go with it. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, right to bear arms, due process, prohibition of unreasonable search and seizure, those and more go against the principles of Marxism. This Saturday is Independence Day. So many people have taken freedom for granted. It's in greater jeopardy than ever before from the internal rather than external threats. There are some who think it is so broken it's unredeemable. I disagree. This country is worth fighting for. Why else are there so many people trying to immigrate here? There's no other country like it. Stand up for America. I'll see you next week.